listening to the Curious About Cannabis Podcast.
Yeah, so soil health is an interesting term. It's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
I've gotten more and more heavily involved in trying to sort of unravel the complexity of what you're talking about, but also just trying to come up with a uniform approach. You know, I start with all growers with what I call a full soil audit, which is really just a number of different nutrient analyses that go beyond what a standard soil test would. So I'm looking very heavily at the chemical side of soil. So there's the biological side, the chemical side, and the physical side. They're all connected, but it's helpful to think of them in three different, as those three different legs of the stool. And so I start with that chemical side in what I call the soil audit that growers order off my website, because that gives me a really good understanding of not only the nutrient capacity and the nutrient flow and availability and all of these different things, but I can also start to see I can start to interpret or extrapolate some of those physical characteristics from what the chemistry looks like. So anyway, to go back to soil health, it's interesting because it totally depends on how you define soil health. And in the general agriculture world, really, it's just the ability for soil to continue to produce crops into the long term. So that involves erosion. It involves soil organic matter, and really because of humanity's necessity to draw down carbon, a lot of people have really honed in on soil health being synonymous with soil organic carbon.
Yeah.
In the cannabis world, though, it seems to be more of a, like you said, living soil definition. So how biologically active, diverse, and abundant are the microorganisms in the soil. So how I look at it is not very different from the old term that the National Resource Conservation Service uses, which is soil quality. Yeah. And I think soil health and soil quality are similar. And when you use the term soil quality, you start to think about it's a holistic definition of chemistry, biology, and physical structure. And so there's a number of actual cultural practices that growers can use to improve soil health. Inputs are actually absolutely a part of that equation, because if you continuously crop cannabis year after year after year without heavily amending the soil, what you're doing is actually mining the nutrients, the mineral nutrients out of that soil. So that's a component. And then finally, biology is a component, and the cultural practices absolutely influence the soil biology. So there's nuance to each one of those categories, but I would argue that if you just take a biological approach, you can actually deplete your soil extremely quickly. If you're just focused on the let's say the characteristics of soil that are physical in nature, the structure, and you're obsessed with no-till, or you're obsessed with tillage for that matter, you can be neglecting other elements of it. So soil ultimately is a sort of diverse organism. And the other thing I'd mention is most cannabis growers are cultivating in soilless media, which isn't actually soil. It's a soil composed of peat moss or coco coir, an aggregate like pumice or volcanic rock or rice hulls, and compost. And there's no sand, silt, or clay. So a lot of this research that I'm learning around soil health and the techniques and practices to improve soil health are questionably applied to soilless media. So anyway, it's a complicated world, and there's not, in my opinion, a great understanding or at least definition of soil health. So that's something I'm sort of working on and picking apart slowly.
We must work untiringly so that our children are obliged to learn the truth. Because it is only through knowledge that we can safely protect them.
You're listening to the Curious About Cannabis Podcast.